the pool or whatever the property is, but you don't own it until you leave closing at the best. And frankly, in the old days, when I was doing a little bit of it, possession might even follow closing by 30 days or so. It may not even simultaneously. I think nowadays, maybe Gary would tell us, possession and closing tend to be a lot closer together. But I mean, I don't know if any of you have had the unfortunate circumstances of buying a termite-ridden property, but you will know that there's some good, important stuff that happens before. I should have probably used going to the bank to get some money maybe, but there's lots of things that happen before you set your mind to want to buy it, and you go through to make sure there isn't termites or oil or sludge, or you have financing or all of these, seriously, environmental assay, that system property I was talking about a minute ago. One of the big things we're missing right now is the environmental study that must be done. But title work, again, I don't do title work, and I'm not the real estate expert, but basically we don't do much in abstracts anymore and title opinions, but there's title insurance. And as anybody knows, until you see the commitment for title insurance and what's listed on it, it may not be the property you want to buy, and you go on through. So anyway, for me, I'm most comfortable, first of all, deferring to the experts. And I've got partners that do real estate, and there are many others, who I think would be among the first to tell you that final action doesn't happen until about closing. That's when you're voting to pay money. You're voting to either deed the property if you're the seller, or acquire the title with an adequate title commitment insurance policy. I'm most comfortable saying that's final action, and I sure wouldn't want you to move any books in or act like an owner until you are an owner, and that's, again, helps me define final action. Until somebody, and there's no court case on the topic to tell us, to construe final action on any of these contexts. So that's the best way I can answer the question.
I don't think they want it defined, meaning the press, etc., because basically they can pick and choose. If they decide this is final action, that's what they designate.
Yeah.
Or not only just the press, etc., but anybody else that wants to attack it. Yeah. It is hard to define.
It is.
It is.
And sometimes when things are hard to define, that's a premise to a syllogism that's looking for a victim. You know, it's easier to get a victim or a perpetrator, I guess, is when the premises are a little uncertain, a little movable, a little swampy, and I think that's part of it. I'm comfortable with the public's trust of library debate and discussion in closed session on proper topics and final action with explanation in public session, and here's why. I think I know, and for 36 years have known the inside of a lot of closed sessions from a lot of governments. I wouldn't make that statement necessarily about some of my school district knowledge or even some cities, no offense. And it's not that they're bad guys or have much hidden agenda, and I'm not talking about repeated errors anyway, or evil intent. There's really very little of it. But I have never seen the library that has anything to hide, really, in terms of they're the cheapest, the cheapest bunch of humans we will ever encounter. And I mean that as a compliment in trust for your taxpayers and public. And I think it can be readily proven. I know inside in a lot of these closed session minutes and meetings, and I think in every instance the reason they're closed serves the public. It doesn't deprive the public. I really will. I'll go to my grave with that belief and that view. And that it accomplishes the sale of property at sensible prices, useful for the taxpayer, a citizen, the acquisition of property at sensible prices. I used to, when I've done open meetings, I always give the example, and I've had this happen to me. I just mentioned a recent example where I'm in a closed session, and because there isn't a broker and there's nobody on the board that does negotiations or real estate or whatever, and I'm the paid person, so they say, Phil, We want you to go negotiate that land, and we'll tell you that we would probably pay $80,000 for that. But we want to try to get it at $50,000. So go have a discussion with that owner and see what they're interested in. Now, if that was public, or if there was a motion to authorize me to negotiate up to $80,000, start at $50,000, how many properties do you think we'd buy at $50,000? Answer, none. We'd probably be lucky to buy any at $80,000. And that's taxpayer money the way I look at it, right? So it's an example. Now, will there be final action? I hope so. I mean, they hope so. They want the negotiation. They want it termite free. They want, all of the process to be able to vote, hopefully on 65,000 under my example. But some final action, yes. Or occasionally, the deal won't go through. It'll break for any number of reasons. And that's, again, I don't feel the public is disserved. I believe they are served. With that alignment of the rules. Other questions?
I had a question. You made reference to public attending the open meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and that you had to, I don't know what your term was, but make reasonable accommodation
Right.
for them in the room. How would you have prior knowledge
Well,
of that?
in the cases, the cases I was alluding to, these were both school district cases. These were rather well-known controversial issues, that they were meeting about. I will liken it to this. This is not a case, but I obviously I represent some cities, and we just had one about 6 months ago where it was a creation of a TIF district, a tax increment finance district in this fairly small city. And its meeting room, its normal meeting room is about the size of this room. And, the clerk and the mayor sort of going into it said, we're publishing a notice for the hearing, and we use a TIF lawyer out of Chicago, not just me. And we anticipated, in fact, they had even sent out sort of invitations to the other government bodies and a lot of the citizenry, put it in the paper. So we anticipated we were going to have a bigger audience. And they called up the school district, and in summer when the school wasn't even in session, but they were kind enough to open up their gym, pull out the bleachers. We probably only had 100 at the start and probably ended with 20. But that was, we kind of anticipated, we were hoping actually for some people that wouldn't fit into our room. So there's a lot of that. It's just kind of common sense. In the two cases that, and maybe this factored into the court's rulings, that they had not accommodated. These were not reasonable settings in those cases because they had very controversial issues. I'm sorry I don't remember details what they were, but they almost purposefully had their meeting in a room like this. I call it a closet because it deprived those people of attending, and they were pretty critical about that. Now, it might have been totally as a surprise that they would have had to recess and reconvene. In other words, not conduct the business because the audience couldn't attend the room that they had prepared. That would have been a good solution. It may not have worked as well because of the schedule of the board members and the staff and everything as if they had been able to move right then, to a gymnasium a block over. But I think that would have also sufficed. But if you don't know, then you pretty much, if you have everybody out here, you pretty much need to suspend and reconvene because you haven't accommodated the public.
Well, suppose you have a room like this, and we don't really know. I've been on the board, 3 years now, and virtually nobody comes, no public people come
Right.
to the meetings.
Yeah.
But now, since this is in the paper and people are getting who are more interested in the library, we might get a flood of people in here some night.
Yeah.
And how do we predict that? Well, we can't.
Yeah.
So what do we do if we can't fit them in the room?
You just answered that question.
Well, yeah, I think part of it is you
Well, we have to
recess.
close the meeting and have another meeting scheduled?
Recess and reconvene if possible. By the way, I apologize for my ignorance about this exact facility, but is this the biggest meeting room in the facility? So you really need a new library. No, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
community meeting space in the towns I practice in frequently is the library. There is no other meeting space. I mean, maybe a school gym, but see, a lot of my communities don't even have schools anymore. They've merged, consolidated, it's 7 miles over. And there's a little bit of seriousness to my quip. If you had another meeting, even though this is your boardroom, you might go to that other meeting room space, and that's an easy reconvening there than here. Assuming you don't have a city that you can impose on, you know, relatively close by and reconvene in a half hour elsewhere, and that causes fairly quick emergency kind of reorganization, then you're going to have to reconvene a day later or 2 days later, or actually my preference under that would not be to reconvene a day later, because unless you know before you adjourn where you're reconvening, and you might by, you know, calling the school and they give permission so you know it's going to be there tomorrow, then you're better off reconvening and post a special meeting notice more than 48 hours. That's actually the better answer most of the time, because that gives you time then to figure out where you're going to reassemble, school district, city. For that matter, I've had a few times where you even have to pay a movie theater or someplace where there is just no other option free or at low cost to accommodate the public. And if the public shows up, that's the burden. I mean, that's what you're going to have to even pay if it takes that to get the space. But that's my best answer. You will be surprised. Unfortunately, that's part of the libraries, is you don't normally have many attendees. I mean, I've seen libraries that for, and by the way, that's a good lesson that I didn't mention earlier. Don't be lulled into a very common phenomenon for libraries. When there's a need to go into closed session, move to go into closed session, it has nothing to do with the humans in this room breathing. Many library meetings, there's no citizen present at all. There's the board and some, you know, staff or two, maybe a lawyer. Move into closed session when you need to discuss a topic proper for closed session, so your minutes and your record of that will also be closed unless and until you release them and review them later. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
I wrote down that to reconvene a meeting, you need to meet within 24 hours. So, let's say we have this space problem. So, how can we reconvene in 24 hours if we can't get space by then?
Yeah. It's a good question, because I've confused you, and I shouldn't have, or I need to clarify. I was first approaching that with a discussion of the 4 types of meetings. From this perspective, there's the regular meeting, the special meeting of 48-hour notice or more, the reconvened meeting, which I said you probably aren't going to have many of, because the rules of them require it be within 24 hours, and that the time and place of the reconvening be announced at the meeting, and you can't change the agenda. Those are the 3 sort of hidden rules of the reconvened meeting. And you're absolutely right, if I heard you right, a reconvened meeting wouldn't work for your scenario. It's not within 24 hours. A reconvened meeting also might not work because you wouldn't know where you're meeting and the time of it during this meeting. You have to go research that or figure that out or ask. So that's why I said reconvened meeting type won't work for you. You're almost certainly going into the special meeting type.
So then you say, we are not going to have this meeting now.
Right.
We're going to vote to adjourn, and we will call a special meeting at some time after 48 hours.
Exactly. Well, and because we don't know where we'll be able to meet. You can explain more. I mean, it's obvious, but we don't know where we're going to meet or exactly the time we can meet there. But we remember from Lenzini that a special meeting, folks, has at least a 48-hour posted notice at our office here, our principal office here, and at the location, wherever that will be. So if it's at the school or a city facility, somebody's going to have to trot over there, post a notice there, and if it's registered news media, you'll even call them or tell them where that meeting's going to be. Remember, that sort of comes in here. But you're right. You would be able to give them some explanation of what's going to happen, but not the particulars.
So you would just adjourn the meeting and say, we'll figure this out.
Right. I'll carry it one step further that I think would work, depending on your crowd. I'll say, if it's this is a small enough room that, let's say there's 20 people, and you really wouldn't want to have 20 audience on top of who's here. This room begins to get cramped, or pick 40 if you want. If all of those people were here, and you could confirm it sort of by chatting with them, but honestly now, I mean, all of them are here for only one part of your agenda, one topic, and they don't care 1 second about your payment of bills or your other issues on your agenda, then you could say, we're not going to adjourn the whole meeting, but we're going to adjourn, and I mean this completely faithfully and honestly and accurately. The topic that they're here for will not be mentioned by anybody. It's not going to be discussed, alluded to, no games, no tricks, no nothing. That will be the agenda of a special meeting for which we'll post notice, later. And then, again, there's a lot of ifs in here, but if none of those people, or only 3 of them and they fit in here, are here for other topics, then I think you go ahead and conduct that part of the meeting consistent with these laws, because you've afforded a sufficient accommodation for the part of the public that want to hear that other issue. It's important to them. In fact, it may be more important that they have a quick, discussion and action on their item, but the 40 or the 50 that can't be accommodated are given a new date and time and place at some point. Okay, so I'll parse it that way. I think you could do that faithfully to the act. Or it's actually these cases that are interpreting now remember I mentioned the one about the cold weather, and there the court gave the government the winning side, saying you were reasonable, you weren't unable to accommodate.
I think it's up to you.
Well, do we need a closed meeting?
Other questions? I promised Dee I would stay as long as anybody wanted to ask questions. As you well know now, the questions are pretty short and to the point. The answers are interminable, but I'll be happy to stay for